Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. Session 3 officially of the Allbound Academy today. So, really excited to get started here. As we have people jumping on, would love to hear where everybody is joining us from today. I know we have Nick on. I'll do a proper introduction, but Nick, if you want to mention just a little high level personal, where you are, and get everybody acquainted. Right. Good. A little bit of everything. A lot of folks from the US. Hi, everyone. Okay, we're going to give everyone a few minutes to join on. If this is your first time joining the Allbound Academy, this is officially session 3, which is going to be the sourcing layer. It's going to be a little bit of a different mentality to how people usually think about signals, but really excited to share with you all a little bit of the theory as we always do. Then we have Nick with us here today from the Clay side, who I'll introduce in just a second, who is going to be walking us through Clay signals and orchestrating all of those pieces. And then we have Corey with us here again, who is the main revenue decision maker for Mentavi Health, who we're building the Allbound strategy for. So as people start trickling in, we're starting to see all of the different places you all are joining from. Really excited to have all of the same names. I was going to say faces, but no names in the chat. For everyone that has been following, this is our third session of the Allbound Academy, and we're going to start getting into the actual builds. So I think, Nick, if you want to give us a little bit of an introduction about yourself in this first few minutes as everybody joins in, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, happy to do that. Hey, everyone. I see the list of all these different cities coming in from all over the world. Saw one Toronto, so that was fascinating to see. I'm Canadian myself. Grew up in Toronto. My name's Nick. I am a go-to-market engineer here at Clay. So what that means is I work with customers and prospects to try to figure out what their go-to-market strategy looks like, how Clay can be deployed, and what does that crawl, walk, run strategy look like across adoption of Clay. Prior to Clay, I spent the last 10 years or so in growth, biz ops, marketing. So I was at Zendesk for 5.5 years, building out a lot of their tools and systems on businesses that they acquired, and then worked at companies like Metadata and a few others, and then eventually was doing something for myself as well. So familiar with some of the B2B tools, excited to kind of dive in. Have been working with Diana on different accounts as well. So looking forward to seeing how we can help here today.
Amazing. Really exciting. Great. Well, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. And just as we do so, let me actually go ahead and, yep, there we go. Those are our slides. So thank you everyone for joining. If this is the first time you are joining the Allbound Academy, just a little bit in regards to how these sessions work, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of theory, which is just going to be like how we think through this particular topic. Today's topic is going to be sourcing. And for us, it's specifically going to be signals. Then we're going to go into a demo, and then we're going to go into the live build of the Allbound blueprint or strategy for Mentavi, which is the company that we are building for. So that's how we're going to work through this particular session. If you haven't been here in the last two sessions, we have already talked about the overarching Allbound blueprint, which is going to be essentially a way to create an engine for ongoing list building based on intent and prioritizing and then taking action on that. And then we spoke about enrichment and segmentation. And I'm actually, when we go into the live build later today, I'm going to show you what the segmentation looks like for Mentavi now, how we organize all of that data, and then start thinking about their specific signals so that you all can start bringing in that information. Also, if this is the first time you're joining, please ask us for the workbook. There's a workbook that goes along with the sessions so that you can build out your own blueprint and have the information to be able to get going and build your own engine. So as people finish trickling in here at the '05 mark, I'd love to hear from you all in the chat if you have actually started with the workbook. Has your blueprint gotten started? Are you into the first few sessions or sections of the workbook? Are you getting in a groove and building things out? I'd love to hear from everybody in the chat. And as some of the answers start coming in, also just a little bit of a note in regards to questions as we go through these different sections that I've been speaking about. You guys can go ahead and add your questions in the Q&A. You should have a Q&A option on the right-hand side of your screen. Please add them there so that we don't lose them through the chat, and can get to them when we have those pauses and Q&A sessions. All right, let's go ahead and dig into today's topic. All right, so I actually only have about 3-4 slides maximum in regards to the actual framework or the thought process. But today we're going to be talking about signals and trigger and how all of that affects your TAM. And so there's like 3 core pieces to just conceptualize what we're going to be talking about here. The first thing is that activity and intent is different. And so when we think about activity from a CRM point of view, you might be thinking about somebody filling out a form or opening your emails. And that's going to be very different from how we consider intent. So that's one of the main pieces to just conceptualize here and differentiate. The second piece is that signals, and I think this is something that I came up with, so just bear with me as I start talking about first and third party signals. I think about signals in the way of like, what am I doing within my brand to be able to create signals for the list building activities? And then what are those triggers that are happening externally? So that's a differentiation between first party and third party signals. And then lastly, all of these triggers are going to become signals that are eventually going to become how we score and prioritize our different accounts. So very important that we keep that in mind as we go through the framework. So the first thing in regards to signals is don't even think about signals. Like that's first rule of thumb. We're not going to be thinking about signals first. We're going to be thinking about triggers. So step out of the space of what does your platform allow you to do or what does your tool is able to monitor. Step out of that space first, and let's think about what are your observable triggers. And the way that I like to think about this is through some of the first questions that we did as homework from the first session. If you guys remember, we talked about like what are your most successful marketing activities, what are the specific actions that people are taking in order to actually reach out to you. Like what are the things, the way that I like to think about this is what are the things that are happening in your prospects companies that make them need your solution at any given point, right? For us at Ref Partners, for example, new hires is a very important trigger because whenever we have a new CRO takes the seat, they usually want to create their own strategy, build their own systems. And that usually also comes with the decision of platforms and decision of the resources that they need to be able to execute on that strategy. So although new hires is a very common signal that a lot of folks are using, for us specifically is something that goes beyond the signal itself and what tools allow us to monitor. And it's really more about the strategic behavior that is happening within this company and this relevant contacts that mean that they would likely need a service like ours. If we actually miss that window, we're looking at another year or maybe even 2 years until our strategy changes or something changes within the business or the org, or they're building a new motion for us to be able to get back into the fold and have them need a service like ours again. So go back to today as you think about this next pieces of information, go back and think about things like what are the best marketing channels for you? If you were to create a report in your CRM and you were able to see the deals that were created in the last 6 months, and you have sourcing information. I mean, I'm operating based on the information that I'm able to get through HubSpot in this case. And so like, can you see the sources of all of these deals that are being created? take a look at that. Is it organic? Is it paid? Is it something else? Is it maybe LinkedIn, right? That can give us a strong indication of some of the first party signals that we might want to track. And then the other piece of that, as you go back to the research that you did based on the workbook, the first section of the workbook is what are the reasons that the latest closed won deals came to you? And the way that I like to do this particular piece, I mentioned it on the first session, but I like to go back to some of my deals and just take a look at the transcripts and figure out like what are the things that people were saying when we were having the discovery call. I usually start any inbound deal that comes to us. So whenever I have a deal that just filled out a form, they booked a meeting with us, the first thing I ask is, why are we even having this conversation today, right? Maybe not in those words, but I ask them like what prompted them to have this conversation. And if you group those answers for 2, 3 different deals that have been closed won, even in that small amount, you'll get a good indication of what those triggers might be. So that's really how I classify signals. If somebody is interacting with your brand, that's what I consider a first party signal. And if somebody is having an external event that has nothing to do with your brand, that does mean that they need your solution, that's what I consider a third party signal. Some examples of that. First party signals can be things like website visits, LinkedIn followers, paid media engagement, or LinkedIn posts. And when I think about website visits, I actually split out between the first time somebody had a website visit, which is the intent that I am capturing as a signal, versus recurring times that they went into the website. I separate those two. For me, the first one is a signal. The ongoing website visits is more an activity that is happening, engagement that is happening within that contact or company. And so if we think about some of these first party signals, not all of them can be sourced through the same platforms. And so some ideas of things that I do personally to be able to get contact level website visits that don't fill out a form is I use a tool like Vector. Either way, regardless of the tools that I'm going to talk to you guys about, it's really important that we think about the flow of the information. So even if I say Vector or Fountain Buster, we're still connecting it first to Clay so that we can do our segmentation and transformation before we push it over to HubSpot, because let's please try to make sure to not create a messy database. The messier your database, the less you're going to be able to do action 5, which is the action layer. And so that transformation and segmentation piece is really, really important. So website visits, I usually use Vector. LinkedIn followers, you can use things like Phantom Buster. Paid media engagement. So if you're doing an awareness or lead generation paid media campaign, you can actually use UTMs, or you can use a tool like Fibbler to be able to identify who has engaged with that paid media campaign so that you can source them into your system. So again, these are people who are not already in your database that you are creating this brand awareness for to bring them into the system. And then lastly, just to mention this last one, because I think they're really important, these first party signals, is LinkedIn posts. So if anybody is engaging with your LinkedIn, if anybody is engaging, is talking about your company, platforms of interest, etc., then these are the things that I'm usually considering first party. And then third party, some of the more common ones are things like funding announcements, new hires, job postings, if there's any like negative competitor review, if there's a merger or acquisition, or if there's a tech stack change. And really this is just like boilerplate information in regards to some of the more common signals. But again, the idea here is that we start from the point of view of what are the things that could mean that somebody is in market? That's the way that I like to identify it. So what are the things that mean that somebody is in market? And then sort of like reverse engineering that into the actual signals. And so when we talk about like signals as a way to source companies and contacts, I started thinking about this as our new MQL. And this is an example of a real report that we create to be able to monitor what this volume looks like. Usually when we are using signals for list building, we are then using that information of the list building to do outreach or do additional retargeting campaigns or whatever activity it is that we want to do. And volume is always going to play a role into that, right? You want to make sure that the signals that you choose are, yes, high intent, but there's always going to be a little bit of a numbers game. And we're not here to talk about spray and pray, definitely against that. But also, if you're only sourcing one or two high intent contacts every month, you're probably not going to have enough to generate like a real prospecting universe that you can go after and be able to get real results from. So the way that I monitor this is, how many contacts, or in this case, companies, am I generating or am I flagging with intent every single month? And what are the signals that are bringing the most information or list building within my CRM? So you can see how progressively, with different signals that I'm tracking within HubSpot in this case, I am able to generate a higher number of volume, and even you're able to see like which signals are generating the highest volume. So we started with a few hundred in November in this particular case, then jumped into the 500 plus mark, and we've started having some ups and downs in regards to the number of signals that are coming in and their volume. And so that this is what we're tracking to make sure that we stay within a baseline of the number of folks that we are effectively going after. So that's how I think about intent and signals as a way of doing sourcing, making sure that then we use the information for the enrichment and segmentation to understand who is in in our ICP and is in market right now, and then pushing that information into HubSpot. We are later going to talk about some specific examples of signals, but before we go into that, just really, really quickly, some recommendations. I definitely recommend that you don't start with too many signals at first. I mean, really try to decide what are your top intent signals, whether your goal is to have really, really high intent signals or one that has a higher volume. I'll talk to you guys about in a minute how to think through volume versus intent. Also, making sure that there's recency. A lot of times we try to pull databases from different sources, and it's like new hires for the last 6 months. Well, maybe I don't really care about the last 6 months. Maybe I only care about the last 2 months, right? And so, like, how recent the action actually happened is very important. And then, not all signals are equal. Some of them are going to have higher intent, some of them are going to have just higher volume. And so, thinking through all of those things is going to be of particular importance. So, that is it for our framework. Now I am actually going to pass it over to Nick to show us some of the signals within Clay and what all can be done.
Thanks, Diana. Well, that was a wealth of information, so thank you for sharing that. I'm sure the folks on the call found that super helpful. Some things that resonated with me from what Diana said, which I see showing up in sales processes with Clay, is, well, for actually, Diana, would everybody on the call already be familiar with Clay, or would it be helpful to give a quick Clay overview?
Yeah, so most of the folks here would have already gone through our latest sessions, where we did a Clay one-on-one sort of. But yeah, I think we have the bases covered.
Perfect, thanks. Yeah, so I think some of the things that resonated with me from what Diana said, which show up in calls with prospects at all sizes of companies, is one, making sure that you define what the signals you want to track are and how that has volumes associated with it. And then two is identify what the execution layer on those signals will be. I think a lot of times, especially on large companies, leadership will want to track every signal, but then there's very little way to actually identify how to take action for sales, marketing, operations teams on those signals. And then they just live as bloat in CRMs or marketing automation tools. So thinking through what those are become extremely important. With Clay, you can track a wealth of different signals. So what I want to do is I actually want to go through a quick overview of how you can see what signals can be tracked within Clay. So what I'll do is I'll share my screen here, and then we'll first look through all the different signals we can track, and then I'll go through a couple of different workflows that have been previously built that show you how we track these signals at Clay, and some of our prospects track these signals at Clay as well, and customers. So let me share my screen here. Diana, can you see my screen with a thumbs up? Awesome. Okay, so if folks have questions, by the way, feel free to drop them in the Q&A alongside this. I can definitely pause along the way and then happy to answer questions as well. We can keep this interactive, and so it doesn't feel like I'm just talking at you the whole time. Okay, so if you end up in Clay, this is kind of a brand new table where you could start building your workflows. But for today's purposes, these are the different types of signals you can track. So you can actually track signals and build your entire TAM based on folks that are changing jobs. So these could be ways that a champion has moved from one place to another place, is how we use it at Clay, where if you've got somebody that previously worked with you and has now moved to a different company, not just a congratulations, but identifying at what point in their new job journey would they be ready to potentially evaluate Clay or your business that you're kind of selling or using for these different tools. Another way is evaluating job postings. So one of the signals and triggers that could make somebody a good prospect for your business is if they are not just have had a person that's already been in that role, but are hiring for that role. So at Clay, this would be things like head of go-to-market ops, head of biz ops, head of growth. If folks are hiring for that, you can actually promote them in your own LinkedIn and your own network, but then also build signals alongside that. Promotion is another really good one. So if you are in a sales process with a customer and you realize that you're not getting to the decision maker, or the decision maker actually doesn't exist, oftentimes the folks that you're actually working with will be getting promoted through the process and they become the decision maker. So congratulating them and then also sending them some potential gifts with different Clay integrations would be a way to do this. Dana mentioned this as part of web intent, where you've got first party data coming in, where you can actually de-anonymize individual or companies at the level of the company level within Clay. So if different businesses are visiting your website, that provides you access to some web intent data. New hires, similar to job change and job posting, where if somebody's been hired at a company, you can track this. And then news and fundraising. So these are different ways that a lot of businesses will use Clay for signals and intent data, where if you have things like a business has made an announcement, they're expanding into a specific region, or a business has made an announcement that they're going to be investing in AI tools or sustainability initiatives. Depending on what your focus for your business is, keeping a track of these news and fundraising data allows you to be able to be a lot more personalized in your outreach. So a way is, as you can imagine, every single business has their own definition of what their AI initiative is called. AI 2026, AI Global, or similar to sustainability initiatives as well. When you outreach with language that they may have in their own initiatives already pre-orchestrated with Clay, you can actually get to a lot more personalization and result in higher response rate there. To keep it more interesting, we're going to focus on some of the custom data points today on how we can orchestrate signals here within Clay. So one of the ways that you can orchestrate signals is using Gong call recordings. So I know that, Diana, you hinted at this a little bit, but let me kind of go through what this would look like. So via a webhook, you can actually bring in your Gong call recordings directly within Clay. This has kind of a JSON format here, which gives you access to things like who attended the call, the exact individuals, exact titles that you would get from Gong. But then you could also get things like the actual Gong call transcript. So once you've brought this call in, you'll be able to get in the full context of this call, right? And you've got things like, oh, not here, here we go. Gong call transcript. So this actually gives you the full call transcript brought into this JSON format of exactly what took place in this call. From here, what you could start doing is some very interesting things. Let's say somebody mentions one of your competitors in a call. You could actually bring that information in. You could use AI here to extract that information from the transcript. So you can say things like, hey, look at any of these competitors that might have been mentioned in the transcript, pull that information in. So first, yes or no, was it mentioned? If it was not mentioned, Clay, you will not use Clay credits to continue that workflow. You could actually stop running that workflow and say, hey, we don't need to do anything further here. But if it was mentioned, identify who the competitor was, in what context was it mentioned, and then if it's related to a specific use case, that's in this case, it looks like less expensive is what it was mentioned, but it was very unclear. You can now start running personalization on this, pushing this data. So for example, Clay recently changed its pricing. They made data costs a lot cheaper. You could actually use this to be able to run automation plays at scale, push this into a Slack message to let the GTM, the rep that's responsible for that account, or you could actually run it as part of any of your outbounding tools. So you can actually send it to one of your sequencers here, and you can say, write me an email sequence that takes into account the pain and concern this customer had, and be able to actually run outreach at scale to everyone that mentioned a competitor, as a way to be able to build some of these signals and intent data orchestrated via Clay. Going to pause there for 1 sec before we continue along other signals and intent data that we could do with Clay. Does anyone have any questions, or Diana, do you have anything to add onto this?
I just wanted to, a little food for thought here as people are thinking about their own signals. If you are in professional services, so for example, a company like us at Ref Partners, working in partnership with companies like Clay or other platforms, can leverage this type of signal really, really well to understand things like upsell opportunities, cross-sell opportunities, or maybe even like, I know I've been speaking with the partnership team at Clay about how could we potentially get some of those transcripts to flag if there is a vendor need. And so really here, the technical part of this, of how all of these points are connected, is just the starting point, and then the creativity and the experimentation that you can do with all of this information is where I really want to have people think about how these signals can actually be put in place and their use cases.
Great. I'm trying to see if there's any questions in the Q&A. Not seeing.
So far, nothing yet.
Okay, great. So what I'll do is I'll just keep going to talk about other interesting signals that may be even relevant for small businesses here. So let's talk about any sort of brand dimensions here. So one of the ways that you could actually use Clay is you could look at a social post, and you could see, this could be on LinkedIn, and you could see if any brand was mentioned on this. So, or if your brand was mentioned on this. So what this does is it kind of looks at the social post. It actually brings in the full metadata from the post. It talks about who the person that wrote the post was, what their title is. This allows you to essentially see whether or not they're going to be a potential prospect, potential investor, potential competitor, or potential champion that's kind of talking about your business. You can also have AI analyze that full post. So a way to do that would be using Claygent, and it would look something like this. You would write this in plain English or natural language, and then you would hit the word generate. And what it would do is it would change this from just your normal written English prompt into an AI generated prompt. And it then takes this full post that was written, and it categorizes it, whether it was a positive post, a negative post, neutral post from sentiment purposes, what the category was. And now you have a lot of information to be able to.
Oh. Sorry, are you sharing screens? I think we're not seeing.
No,
yet.
That was entirely my fault. Sorry about that, guys. Let me share screen again. All right.
While you do that, we do actually have a question for you. Would Greg Pritchett ask, would there another AI note taker transcripts like Fathom work for this as well?
You can bring it in via a webhook or an API if they have access to that, but Gong is the native integration for transcripts. The other way you could do this is you could use the Claude MCP if you've got any sort of MCP connections with Fathom or Granolas of the world to be able to bring that in as well. Okay, well, sorry about that, guys. Let me go back to a little bit here. So what I was showing was social post data where a brand has been mentioned as a way to be able to do a custom signal here, where what you could start doing is you can start bringing in the actual post metadata, right? And you could start identifying who that person was. You could enrich that person in full. So this is one of the big benefits of Clay, where you have full experience data of this individual that wrote this post, what their summary is, this is very similar to what's benchmarked to LinkedIn here. You now have information on whether or not this using AI based on analyzing this post, you can actually identify, and you would write this in natural English, and then you can use the word generate here to be able to translate this into a prompt that would be submitted into an AI LLM model. You could choose whichever model you'd want, and you could actually extract this information about whether it was positive, neutral, negative sentiment, what the use case was, whether it was some sort of a promotion. And now you can actually trigger workflows on this. So what we do is we can say, hey, if somebody's mentioning a specific use case and it's a positive sentiment, we can then see whether or not this person would be interested in doing a case study with us potentially. If somebody's promoting an event, we then say aggregate all the events that are being promoted across a specific event that's mentioning our brand, and we can identify whether or not we want to promote or have a sponsorship for that event using Clay branding as well. So these are ways that you could start building your own go-to-market alpha. And what that means is being able to identify a unique way to position your brand, your business, that your competitors are not thinking about or doing manually, but you can do this at scale because you've got Clay and other tools that Diana mentioned at your disposal as well. We can keep going with other signals. Diana, any feedback from you here? What would be the best use of time here? I'm happy to keep going. We've got lots of different signals to get through.
I think if we could do one more signal, that'd be great. And I actually have a question for you because I've never done it directly within Clay for this particular social post one. Do you know if within this flow we can actually source people who like and comment on those posts, or only the author?
You can, I believe you can do both.
Okay.
I know LinkedIn sometimes has been tricky and they change their policies on what's allowed and what's not allowed. So I'm gonna have to come back to you on that one. Social engagement, I'm just checking. I think you can get some social engagement data, but I don't think you can fully get everything. You can get comments, but I believe you cannot get likes.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, I'll do one more, which is a fun one. This is Reddit. So it's a different source. I'm going to share my screen again. Don't forget to do that this time around. Alrighty, so for Reddit, what you can do is you can actually look at specific. So in this case, I'm going to show you what signal we're tracking here. You can look at, you can actually see if any specific brands were mentioned, and also be able to pull in. So in this case, we're looking for whether Clay was mentioned, and then we're looking for what the date of the post was, which subreddit it was posted on, what the title of the post was, and what the actual post text was. Again, you can do things like analyze this post. You can see whether or not it's been talking about a use case, what the sentiment of the post was. You can see that Clay is not always positive. You've got some negative posts here as well. And what you can start doing here is you can start doing a lot of different things here. So Reddit actually uses Clay in a very interesting way, where they're using brands that are going to be mentioned. So for example, one of their use cases that they used for is when M&M launches new flavors, the first time people comment on whether they're happy about that flavor or not gets posted on Reddit, which makes sense because it's not going to show up on LinkedIn, right? It's not going to show up on Meta potentially. It's going to show up on random subreddits where people get obsessed by new things. And Reddit wanted to use this to be able to provide the customer feedback to M&M on what the sentiment is on the newest flavors that are being launched. And that was one of the ways that Reddit was interested in using Clay to be able to use this data and then close the loop with their sales team to be able to get information and product feedback, because it's being mentioned first on Reddit and then on other social channels. So this would be a way that you could think about using Clay as well for your businesses, whether you're trying to track larger businesses on what the negative or positive or neutral sentiments are. And then you can use that for product feedback for your small businesses. You could also use that to be able to have engaging conversations with your prospects when you're saying, hey, we often hear that this is the issues with what our competitors are talking about. And then generally that might resonate as well.
We have a couple of questions for you.
Let's do it.
So Hyde Phillips asks, what's the top performing signal you've seen for smaller businesses who might not be getting brand mentions regularly?
I would say the most common signal that I'm seeing across small businesses that is most actionable is news data, only because that takes into account macroeconomic trends that might be happening or specific businesses that you're trying to sell to, around what you could take specific languages around AI initiatives of a business. I previously mentioned this. Also, any sort of expansion plans, and being able to get to that customer or prospect as quickly as possible from when that news was published. Also, generally, when you outreach with something like, hey, saw your blog post, saw your news around this via email, via LinkedIn, even via your manual phone calls, your prospects are going to feel proud about that post having impact. And generally, you're going to have a lot more enriched conversations across them.
Awesome. We actually have two more questions. One of them just came in, but it kind of is a great follow-up here. Angie Tang asks, how do you prioritize which signals to focus on?
Yeah, Diana hinted at this a little bit. Diana, I know that even outside of Clay, you've seen some of this. Do you want to take this one first? And I'm happy to answer it right after that, just because I know that you've got a full playbook around this.
I'm actually going to talk about it right when I give the examples for Mentavi. But if you have any initial thoughts, feel free to share them, and then I'll go
Great.
into my piece.
Okay, great. So the way that we prioritize signals is, the way that different sales folks will do it differently. The way that I like to talk to the businesses that I'm talking to, and generally what I've seen work, is taking a step back from the signals and just asking, what is the business metric that this individual and this business is trying to impact? And then for larger organization, what is most important to their leaders? So generally it comes down to two main things, which is pipeline or closed bookings, depending on if it's sales or marketing. If it's pipeline, identifying what signals can move pipeline from stage 1 to stage 2, or create net new pipeline. So on the news side of things, if you've got, again, information about a business that's not currently part of TAM, and all of a sudden the news gets released about that business, you should now prioritize bringing that in. In terms of the prioritization of what type of signals, again, depends on the type of business you are and the volume of signals that are available for your business. So for example, if you are a business like Uber Eats and you're trying to sell to restaurants, you probably will not have a lot of signals on LinkedIn, because most restaurant owners don't live on LinkedIn, but they live on Instagram or Yelp, and the amount and Google Maps, and what their ratings are on Google Maps and what their followers are on Instagram leads to a signal that may be relevant for what you're trying to promote to that business. So it's a really hard question to answer unless you know what the business strategy is. And I think oftentimes this is where I started off with as well, making sure that you don't just say, let me get you all the signals, which is actually why I paused, because I have lots of tabs of lots of different signals we can show you guys. But taking a step back and identifying what is a business priority today, short-term, medium-term, long-term, what are the signals that showcase that short-term, medium-term, long-term priority, and then mapping the execution behind that becomes more important than just here's a wall splatter of all different signals that you can track.
Thank you. Awesome. Okay, so our last question for you is a little more specific. So Bilal asks, is there a workflow that imports CRM data to automatically track job changes or promotions among champions from closed-won deals?
Yes, there is. Depending on the CRM you're using, Clay's got a native integration with Salesforce, HubSpot, Attio, a few other CRMs. What you would do is you'd be able to have this run on so it wouldn't be real time. You'd have this run weekly, daily, however frequently you'd kind of want this to run. We recommend weekly. I don't think signals data more than that is frequently important enough for your tier 1 accounts. And then you can track job changes across that. Once you've triggered that there's a job changer taking place across that list of accounts, you can then trigger a workflow that would link to your sequencer to be able to send an email. You could link it to Sendoso to send a gift to that individual as well if they've changed jobs to a new company, as an example, and you know enough about them. Happy to grab time with that person or send some follow-up across exactly what those workflows look like and where you could access some templates across those as well.
That would be awesome. We actually had a follow-up to that question, so I lied. Not the last one.
That's
Got
okay.
one more. Nicholas Arias asked, do we need the contact's personal email address to track those job changes? Specifically wondering because corporate email typically changes when their job does. So does that affect it?
So this is one of the biggest benefits of how individuals and businesses will use Clay. As you can imagine, CRM data is often stale. You've got a list of contacts across map twin accounts. And for large companies that I work with, you could have millions of companies with hundreds to tens of millions of contacts that no longer work at these companies. So part of Clay is you will do a CRM enrichment project. You can identify which individuals actually work at those companies still. If they've changed jobs, we would then re-enrich that person to get their new email address, and then you would use that as a way to be able to action on that data. Once a job change takes place, you also need to re-enrich that individual and then move them from being mapped to your old account to your new account in your CRM, and ensure that their contact hierarchy mapping is also in place based on that. So you do not need personal email address. You'd be able to do this from work email and the enriched profile to be able to do this. You generally don't need personal emails for anything other than hashed personal emails if you're trying to activate ad audiences. So if you're doing any sort of LinkedIn ads or meta ads across a list of contacts, Clay has a product which converts work email address into a hashed personal email. And then that's what's used on the ad platforms, because most of the time individuals will not sign up for LinkedIn or Meta using their work email address because of this exact reason. Well,
right.
Meta, they're signing up with lovesoccer@hotmail.com because that's what they've got signed up from when they were in middle school or high school. But when you've got things like people changing jobs, they would never really sign up for their work email address on LinkedIn. They'd map it to their personal email address, which is where a huge set of companies, Slack, Atlassian, to name a few, are using Clay to be able to have the highest match rate on those ad platforms. That was a little shameless plug on how you could use Clay for your business, but you've got me on here, so I wanted to make sure I do that as well. But yeah, that's probably one of the biggest use cases for personal email address and proxy.
That's awesome. We do actually have a follow-up question but what I'm going to do is actually ask, in addition to sharing more about that workflow you mentioned, would you also share, as a recap to this session, a little bit more about how you get those hashed emails through Clay, like just maybe tips or pointers as a follow-up?
I can share that. TLDR is it's a hash email waterfall. Clay uses waterfalls to be able to track different data points across a variety of vendors, and there's about like 5 different vendors that provide the hash email address, and we run it through a waterfall. I also see a question that came in about audiences today. That was launched today. Super exciting launch for us. Clay's very excited about this one. It's been in development for a while, and it's been a huge request. I don't think we're covering that today, but I can share some more information about that launch. Again, TLDR is Clay was limited to 50,000 rows across a table. With the new launch of audiences, that limits have gone away now. So you have a lot, you can basically have millions of records coming in from your CRM directly running workflows within Clay, and then taking action on from your first party and third party data as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you. So basically, I think everyone, what we're going to do is get a nice, robust follow-up after this. There are a couple of other questions in the chat, but what I am going to do is hold those because I think Diana is about to dive in and will answer some of them. So keep questions coming in the chat, but I'm going to stop for now. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you, Nick, for that walkthrough. I know everybody's really interested in figuring out how Clay is going to be able to accelerate this entire intent and list building engine. So I'm actually going to bring on Corey so that we can talk about some of the specifics of the build that we're doing here for the Allbound strategy for Mentavi Health, and give you guys a little bit more information in regards to how we're thinking about signals, how we're going to be prioritizing them. And if there's any questions that we're not able to get through, because I know we're already about 15 minutes out from the end of the session, we'll try to address them via Slack. If you're not connected over Slack, you can always ask us for the link to get there. So Hi, Corey. Thank you so much for joining us again. Really quickly, do you mind giving just a 1 minute summary of Mentavi and what we're doing here with you guys on the Allbound strategy?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm just super excited to be working with Rev Partners in general because we work with you all on a different aspect of our business and optimizing our HubSpot presence. We're a behavioral healthcare company headquartered here in the U.S. We serve all 50 states, venture backed, 20 million in revenue annually. Focusing on diagnostic evaluation for ADHD, depression, anxiety. We have half of our patients coming in through direct consumer motions, totally fine there. The other half of our patients come through B2B, and part of our strategic growth is to increase that from 50 to 60%. And we're a small team working really hard, and so we might as well work smarter than harder, and that's why I'm talking to Diana.
Yeah, great. All right, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and actually start screen sharing because the exercise for today is going to require some information coming from you. And so I know that we've been doing some research. You've shared a lot of really great info, and I do have a few signals to think through. But what I want everybody to start sort of like the conversation from is obviously this is a specific industry. We are tackling healthcare. There's going to be restrictions. We have to fall within this general guidelines of what healthcare industry is going to allow us to do versus getting creative and finding the signals and this intent and information. As a note, if this is the first time you're hearing about this particular use case that we're running through, we are only focusing right now in the B2B sector of Mentavi, and so we're not touching anything that has to do with B2C. We're exclusively working through the segments that pertain to B2B. And actually, I might have forgotten to share this with you guys, but based on our last conversation from last week, we were looking at what are the enrichment data points and how are we going to be segmenting all of these different companies. And so this is where we landed with our segmentation. We have really clear lines of which ICP segments we are going to be going after, what are the verticals, so that we can have Claygens be able to pinpoint us in the right direction of what these different companies fall under. There's some signals that I already started thinking through, and then there's like pains that I am associating with each one of them. And again, as context, we're going to be using all of this information really, really cleanly set up in this way so that we can then feed it into all of the AI mechanisms that we're going to be building, like Claygens to be able to do the segmentation, like all of the different, again, Claygens to be able to create the messaging, like the tailored messaging, and be able to speak into some of these specific pain points. And then I also went in and I did the buyer persona mapping, which this would have been the homework from last session, where each one of the different segments that we have identified have job titles that we're looking for, persona labels that we're going to be tagging, buying roles, and what they care about. And again, all of this information will be later helpful for how we are going to be building the messaging around these folks. So I wanted to start here today with this exercise, Corey. Again, two ways in which we think about this first party and third party signals. So I'm curious if off the top of your head, you have information in regards to maybe like best marketing channels that you've seen people come through, or you've maybe done some research around that you can point us in this particular direction.
Yeah, this has been really insightful session with Nick. So that's really great prep. Thank you very much. And then your input earlier. We have some LinkedIn campaigns running specifically for our therapy, healthcare professional ICPs, and then our primary care ICPs. And I actually just got a nice little dashboard from my paid spend vendor, which is like, pulled out all of the like really active engagers and whatnot as far as on the company level. So there's something there. My spend there right now is about 20K a month. So we're getting some pretty good reach and traction. And then we have some referral pages on our websites. We have two websites where healthcare professionals submit patient referrals, and they also include like their own name, because we have automated workflows on, hey, Dr. Hart just recommended you take this evaluation. So we have those contacts that they provide for those referrals. Then third, another first party situation is inside the diagnostic evaluation. We have a question that we ask the patients, like, would you like us to send a copy of your evaluation to your provider? And they can click yes, and then they put their provider name in there and fax number. So those are the top of mind ways that we are compliantly capturing this information. We're not allowed to drop a pixel and just track all the traffic. We can't really do that.
Right.
And then we do go to events, and so we do have folks. So we build a landing page, and then we have a UTM that we have specifically for that call to action, say for a free one of our products or whatnot. So we sometimes, that's not a lot of volume there, but that is another action that we would be able to suck into this.
Yep.
The meetings that we have with folks, that was so, like, Nick, you blew my mind with like importing transcripts. That's genius. But I don't really see how that would benefit us.
Yeah, your specific industry.
Yeah, our industry. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay, great. Really appreciate that. What about when it comes to third party? Is there anything that comes to mind in regards to the triggers that would cause a practitioner to come to you on their own?
That would be usually they come because of a referral.
Referrals.
Or
Okay,
we
that's the
have
main
also seen that some patients, well, for example, we had a patient use a promo code incorrectly and wanted a discount, like a refund. We're like, well,
one. Okay.
how'd you hear about this promo code? Oh, well, my doctor gave it to me. That promo code was aligned to a podcast that aired years ago. So that doctor's just been like handing out this promo code for years, and now we know who that doctor is. So
Got it. Okay.
sometimes we have that kind of stuff come in.
Okay, very nice. Alrighty, well, really appreciate that. So I had actually done a little bit of homework, and I think it aligns with what you are saying, although there's definitely things I will add on here. So the first piece that you mentioned, I'll actually take it off. So the first piece that you mentioned is paid media campaigns, and I actually call this paid engagers. And because of the specifics of your industry, you're only going to be able to get that company information, but we can use this as a first party signal. We can source that company information and then automatically get the contacts of interest for us from those different companies. So that's definitely a signal that I would recommend. And I'm just going to move this here for a second so that I can put the different signals. So paid engagers is the first one. The referral page, there's actually two things that you mentioned. So referrals coming, a doctor sending you a referral, and then the referee giving you the information of the doctor, right? And so I actually think I had this one, which is the second one that you mentioned. So the patient is mentioning on their own who the doctor is, and then we can sort of like reverse engineer that information and reach out to the doctor directly so that they can refer us to additional customers. But I'll definitely add on here the referral page so that we can use that as a source. And then events. So I did add here specific conferences that I thought would be of note, although obviously I'm not familiar with the specific events that you are going to, if you are putting your own events together, but definitely events would be the other source that I would put here. The trick with events is that there's not really a good way for us to like automatically create or have tables that will automatically bring all of the information in regards to all of the different attendees of the event. It's something that you have to sort of like build as you go, or as you join different events or as new events come through. So it's not one of the signals that we're just going to be able to have automatically bring new companies and contacts into the system, but it's definitely one of the most important signals I've seen from first party that either bring conversations directly at the events, or because I consider like pre-event outreach and then post-event outreach. So gathering information about who is joining the event or going to the events to do pre-event outreach to get meetings there. And then on the flip side of that is like the people that we actually source from this event. How do we make contact with them after the event, right?
Right.
So these three would be the top, like, and maybe like we put this one up here with referral page, which I know is a little bit different, but just to group them under first party. These are the ones that I would consider first party, and we can talk a little bit more about later. And then when it comes to these conferences or memberships, are these of importance to you? Are there any other specific like memberships that you would be interested in?
Yeah, so we
ADEA and
belong to
Mhm.
we belong to a couple different, say, healthcare specific networking organizations,
Yep.
and so we attend those events.
Perfect.
We're a member of our local chamber, so
Mhm.
like we have access to that database.
Perfect. Okay. So we'll capture those specific ones for you. And then I was also thinking about companies or practitioners that have profiles in some of these other, I don't know if to call them like directories or
Yeah,
these types of companies that are like Psychology Today, Therapy Den, because we could set up a signal that is automatically monitoring those pages and bringing in those different contacts and companies and then enriching them in Clay.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
killer for sure. Like
Okay.
Psych Today is the number one way that people find their therapist.
There you go. Okay, great. And then I also have a few other ideas here in regards to negative reviews, specifically talking about like if a clinical, if a practice has negative reviews on Yelp, for example, about like timing or maybe like not getting full service or anything like that, that might be something that we could track.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Google and Yelp are notorious for having, especially in healthcare, people love to
Yeah,
use those as spots to roast
yeah,
people rather than praise them. So,
exactly.
and then Reddit
Okay,
also has a lot of stuff in there about
perfect.
individual companies.
Okay, fantastic. And then the last one I have here in regards to signals is more around like if they have any news, which is one of the signals that Nick was mentioning, if they have any news that they are specifically talking about in regards to like program expansion. I think this one is a little bit more for universities, is what I was thinking about. So, like if they're getting an accreditation renewal or expanding their specifically like healthcare, mental health programs, that would be something to monitor as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right. Let me go ahead and jump over this last few minutes here in regards to how I would go about prioritizing some of these things. So, the first thing is we're going to be using this particular slide, and I'll share with you guys over Slack the final thought of this because I know I only have a few minutes, but the way that I think about this is the bucket that you want to prioritize, and then this is the next one, and this is the next one, and this is the next one. So it's a mix of how easy is it going to be to detect, how much high intent is it actually going to have, and is the volume high enough? So when I think about companies like ours, Ref Partners, I think about, for example, mergers and acquisitions as a signal. Well, how many companies are actually going to be going through a merger and acquisition on a yearly level, even? And like, is that a good enough intent for me to reach out? So for Ref Partners, it's actually really high intent if a company is going through a merger or acquisition, because it means that they're likely going to have platforms that are need to connect, etc. So it's very much on the high intent side. But how many companies are actually doing that on a monthly or yearly level? That's probably going to have a really low volume. And so I would probably put it somewhere around here or here, depending on once we do the reverse engineering of how we're going to be sourcing the information, if it's going to be easy to detect or hard to detect. In this case, I know off the top of my head that mergers and acquisitions, as an example, is easy to detect. So I would probably put it around here. So what we want to prioritize are the ones that are going to be lower lift, that have the highest intent for us, that also have the highest volume. So in this case, for example, as we're talking about the different intent signals for Mentavi, I would probably start with paid engagers because it's already built. There's already a whole bunch of money that is going into it. We're likely seeing some volume in there. It's not going to be difficult to set up, and we can start reaching out to those folks almost immediately. Once I handle paid engagers, I would probably go with something like the profiles that we can monitor on an ongoing basis, because I'm trying to sort of do that balance between like really, really high intent, which is probably going to be this one. This is probably going to be a little bit of lower intent because it's just them sort of like looking at a campaign. And that doesn't necessarily mean there's a high need for the service right now. And so sort of like balancing those different things within this specific exercise is what's going to be most important. So take a look at this slide so that you can do your prioritization for your signal. I will be sharing what this looks like for us in Mentavi over the next week or so. As we get to the end of this conversation for today, a reminder that we're going to have a 2-week gap so that people enjoy vacation and New Year's, July 4th and whatever it is. And we're going to be back on July 15th. Our very next session is actually going to be with HubSpot, and it's going to be an AI HubSpot expert that's going to show us how we're building all of these different activities directly within HubSpot. And we're also going to take the chance to work with Corey offline so that we can build some of these things and show you via Slack what we are going to be building, so that you all can see it live. So Nick, Corey, thank you so much for coming on today. If anybody wants to stick around, I can answer a few questions. But thank you all for joining and have a good one. So thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye, Nick. All right.
And any questions that we don't get to, we will answer in Slack. I have a running list. Also, if you're not in Slack, please join so that you'll be able to